The mysterious signal. In the vast reaches of space, where stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across an endless dark sea, the alien ship drifted silently. Its crew, composed of beings from the farthest corners of the galaxy, were on a routine mission, exploring uncharted territories. They had seen countless planets, civilizations, and wonders of the universe, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to discover. It was a normal day in the ship's control room, until a strange, almost imperceptible sound broke the usual hum of the systems. A soft beeping echoed across the ship, coming from a nearby communications panel. The sound was faint at first, so faint that the crew almost dismissed it. But then, the frequency grew louder, sharper, and unmistakably urgent. "Captain, you need to see this," said one of the crew members, a young alien with bright blue skin and curious eyes. His voice carried an edge of confusion, something rare among the experienced explorers. The captain, a tall and imposing figure with scales that shimmered like polished emeralds, turned swiftly to the monitor. She had heard many signals during her time in space. Some were natural, others artificial. But this one was different. There was something about it that didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just a signal. It was a message. And not just any message. It was a call, a warning, and a challenge all wrapped into one. "This signal," she said, her voice cold with concern, "it's coming from Earth." The mention of Earth caught everyone's attention. Earth was a planet known across the galaxy, but mostly as a primitive world, still young in its development, with no significant technological advancements. It wasn't considered important by galactic standards, more of a curiosity than anything else. Yet, here it was, sending a signal powerful enough to reach across the stars. The message seemed out of place. "We need to investigate," the captain decided. She gave the order to change course immediately. The crew moved quickly, pulling up the coordinates and adjusting the ship's direction. Within moments, they were hurtling toward the blue and green orb known as Earth. As the alien ship entered Earth's atmosphere, the crew members were still puzzled. The signal was old, they could tell that much. It had been sent long ago, but somehow it had just now reached them. Whoever or whatever had sent it didn't expect an answer, not anymore. But that didn't explain why it was so strong, or why it had taken this long to be received. The ship cut through the clouds and entered the upper atmosphere, their advanced sensors scanning the surface below. The planet seemed peaceful from above, with vast oceans and landmasses spread across the globe. But as they got closer to the surface, something unusual appeared on their radar. There, deep below the ocean, was a massive, hidden structure. The captain leaned forward in her seat, her eyes narrowing. The structure was unlike anything she had seen before. It was ancient, yet its design was clearly sophisticated, more advanced than the current technology of Earth, and it was buried, submerged beneath the water. The signal was coming from that exact location, and the closer they got, the clearer it became. "Prepare to land," the captain ordered. Her voice was steady, but the curiosity in her mind was growing. What had been hidden beneath the oceans of this small, unimportant planet? What was it about this underwater city that had drawn the attention of an advanced species? The ship descended toward the coordinates, passing through layers of dense clouds, before finally breaking through to the surface of the ocean. The waters below were dark and deep, with occasional flashes of light dancing across the surface. The alien ship hovered silently above the water, its advanced technology making no sound. "Initiate scanning protocols," the captain commanded, watching as her crew began to deploy probes and begin scanning the depths below. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The signal was clear. There was something down there. But what? Minutes passed, but the readings grew more and more bizarre. The structure below was enormous, its sheer size incomprehensible. The ship's sensors began to pick up strange energy readings that didn't match anything in the known universe. The crew had encountered powerful energy sources before, but this was unlike anything they had ever witnessed. The captain's mind raced. Could this be some kind of ancient technology left behind by a long-lost civilization? Or was it something far more dangerous, something that had been hidden for a reason? The possibilities were endless, but one thing was clear. Whatever was down there, it was not ordinary. "Prepare the landing teams," the captain ordered. "We are going down." The crew members suited up in their exploration gear, preparing to enter the depths of the ocean. As they descended into the water, the sense of mystery only deepened. The waters around them were cold and dark, and the pressure grew with every meter they sank. But the crew pressed on, their curiosity driving them forward. As they approached the location of the signal, a massive shadow loomed in the distance. It was the underwater city, its outline barely visible against the dark abyss. The ancient city was unlike anything they had imagined. Tall spires reached up from the ocean floor, covered in layers of seaweed and coral, yet still standing firm. Structures of unknown materials glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across the surrounding waters. The crew could only stare in awe, a sense of disbelief settling in. This wasn't just a lost city. This was something far beyond their understanding, something from a time long before their own. The aliens had stumbled upon Earth's greatest secret, one that had been hidden for eons beneath the waves. But as they drew closer, a chilling thought crossed their minds. What if this discovery wasn't meant to be found? What if the signal was a warning? Something far darker was waiting for them inside the lost city of Atlantis. With that thought hanging in the air, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The first descent. The water around the alien ship was thick with darkness. The vast, endless expanse of the ocean below seemed to stretch forever, with the ancient city of Atlantis looming just out of reach. The crew could barely comprehend what they were about to face. This was no ordinary planet. Earth held secrets buried beneath its oceans, waiting to be unearthed. The ship's engines hummed softly as it descended further into the depths. As they got closer to the ocean floor, the light from the ship's advanced technology began to pierce the murky waters, revealing glimpses of what lay below. They could see massive structures, tall spires, columns, and what appeared to be crumbling buildings, all encrusted with seaweed and algae. The architecture was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. It was elegant yet imposing, designed in a way that seemed to defy the logic of their modern civilizations. "Maintain course," the captain ordered, her voice steady, but filled with anticipation. Her eyes remained focused on the screen in front of her, showing live feeds of the underwater city. The team had discovered something extraordinary, and they were on the brink of revealing its secrets. The crew members sat in their seats, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of the control panels. They had all been trained for a variety of exploration scenarios, but none of them could have prepared for what they were about to uncover. The signal had led them here, and now they were poised to find out why it had been sent and what Earth's forgotten civilization had left behind. As they approached the ruins, the ship's sensors began to pick up unusual energy readings. The structures were emitting faint pulses of energy, too organized to be natural, yet not advanced enough to be immediately recognized by the alien explorers. It was a mystery. The energy signature felt ancient. The technology seemed to have been dormant for centuries, but it was still active, somehow resonating through the ocean itself. "Activate external sensors," the captain commanded. "I want to know what we're dealing with down there." The exterior sensors lit up, sending out waves of energy that bounced off the city's walls, returning data to the ship's crew. As the readings came in, they revealed something incredible. The city wasn't just old, it was alive. There was a pulse beneath the ocean floor, as if the city was waiting to be awakened, waiting for something to trigger it. The aliens exchanged nervous glances. The ancient city, once thought to be lost forever, seemed to be reawakening as they approached. What was causing this reaction? Why had the city remained hidden for so long, only now to stir at the arrival of the alien explorers? "We need to get closer," the captain said, her voice carrying an edge of urgency. Prepare for direct descent to the city center. The alien ship continued its slow descent, inching closer to the massive structure that dominated the ocean floor. As they got closer, the crew could see more details. Massive stone buildings covered in intricate carvings, some of which seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. The architecture was elegant yet eerie, as though it belonged to a civilization far more advanced than any the crew had encountered. The city was a ghostly shell of its former self, yet there was a feeling of life, of something still lingering beneath the surface. The ship's scanners picked up even more anomalies as they hovered above the city. There were deep trenches surrounding the main structures, as though the city had been buried on purpose. Some parts of the city were completely submerged, while others were raised, as if the water had once been much lower. The team had no idea what could have caused this drastic change in the landscape, but the mystery only deepened. "Captain," one of the crew members said, his voice filled with awe, "this place, it's not just an ancient city, it's a fortress." The captain's eyes narrowed as she took in the data. It wasn't just a city, it was something more. The walls, the layout, the energy readings, it all pointed to one thing. This wasn't just a forgotten civilization. This was a place of power, a place that had been sealed away for a reason. "We need to be careful," the captain said, her voice heavy with concern. "Whatever this is, it's not just a city, it's a weapon, a powerful one." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. They were in a place where ancient forces could be hidden, waiting to be unleashed, and they had no idea what dangers lay in the shadows. As the ship descended lower, the crew members could see massive statues lining the entrance to the central part of the city. The statues were unnervingly lifelike, their features finely detailed. It felt like they were watching the crew, like the statues were guarding something that should never be disturbed. The crew's nerves were on edge. They knew that every step they took brought them closer to something unimaginable. "Steady," the captain said as the ship gently touched down on the ocean floor. The city now loomed right in front of them, its silent presence overwhelming. "We need to send out a probe first. I'll have my team inspect the perimeter." The crew moved into action, preparing the exploration drones and equipment. The atmosphere inside the ship was tense, as everyone could feel that they were on the verge of discovering something that would change everything. But what? The team deployed the first probe into the city. As the drone ventured deeper into the ruins, its cameras began to transmit footage back to the ship. The images were grainy at first, but they quickly cleared, revealing an expansive hallway leading into the heart of the city. The walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols that pulsed faintly in the drone's light. It was like walking into a tomb, but not just any tomb. A tomb with secrets that could destroy or reshape entire civilizations. The drone passed through the hallways, scanning the surroundings, and eventually reached what appeared to be a massive central chamber. The size of the room was astonishing. It was as if the entire city had been built around this one central point. At the far end of the chamber stood something that could only be described as a throne. It was made of a material that the crew couldn't identify, but it emitted an eerie glow, as though it was waiting for someone or something. "Get the team ready," the captain said, her voice filled with anticipation. "We're going in." The first steps onto the soil of Earth's lost city would soon be taken. The crew was about to enter the heart of the ancient civilization, unaware that the city's true purpose was far darker and more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The hidden truths. As the crew stood before the enormous stone throne, their minds raced. The air inside the chamber felt thick with history, as if it carried the weight of centuries. Every member of the team was struck by an overwhelming sense of awe and fear. This place, hidden beneath the oceans for so long, was no ordinary ruin. The faint glow from the throne flickered like a heartbeat of something ancient, something powerful, and something that had been waiting, dormant, for centuries. "Captain, there's something strange about the throne." One of the crew members, a sharp-eyed alien named Zora, spoke up. Her voice was low, filled with a sense of unease as she scanned the intricate patterns carved into the structure. It doesn't look like a seat of power. It looks like a control mechanism. The captain's gaze flicked to the throne, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Zora's words resonated deeply. The throne wasn't just for sitting. It was designed, she realized, for controlling something. But what? What could it have been used for? And why was it so important? Let's examine it closely, the captain ordered. Her voice carried an edge of caution as she took a few tentative steps toward the throne. As she approached, the strange, glowing symbols that covered the walls seemed to pulse with energy. The air around them seemed to hum, vibrating with a faint, steady rhythm. Something was awakening. Her team spread out cautiously, scanning their surroundings. The hall was vast, and the sense of unease grew with each step. The walls were decorated with murals depicting scenes of war and conquest, alien armies clashing against colossal, monstrous creatures. Yet there was no sign of what had caused the city's fall. The murals didn't tell the story of a civilization's demise. Instead, they seemed to glorify the very thing that had likely caused it, a powerful, unrelenting force. "Do you see that?" Another crew member, Talik, whispered as he pointed to a series of ancient inscriptions carved into the stone walls. "These symbols, they match the ones we found in the signals." The captain nodded, her mind racing. The signal they had picked up was no coincidence. It had come from this city. But why? And why now? Could the city have been sending a message for centuries, waiting for someone, or something, to finally answer? "We need to decode these symbols," the captain said firmly. "Get to work, Talik." As Talik set to work on the data, the rest of the crew circled the throne. The captain felt a nagging sense of urgency, an unspoken warning. The throne was the key to understanding the city's purpose, but there was a much deeper mystery at play. Why had it been hidden beneath the ocean, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy? As the crew busied themselves with their scans, the captain stood still, her eyes never leaving the throne. She felt drawn to it, as if something about it was calling her. Her hand hovered just above the surface of the throne, trembling slightly as if a force was pulling her in. Was it the throne itself, or something within her? She couldn't tell. But she knew one thing for sure. The secrets of this city weren't meant to be uncovered so easily. Suddenly, Talik's voice broke through her thoughts. "Captain, you need to see this." The captain turned sharply. Talik was staring at the data on his console with a mix of shock and disbelief. His fingers flew over the screen, adjusting and recalibrating, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "These symbols," Talik said slowly, "they're not just part of the city's history. They're a warning. This city, this throne, it was built to house something powerful, something dangerous." The captain's heart skipped a beat. The implications of Talik's words hit her like a punch to the gut. If this city had been hidden for a reason, if the throne was designed to hold something powerful, what were they truly dealing with? "What kind of power are we talking about?" she demanded, her voice hard. Talik paused, his fingers trembling as he continued to analyze the data. "I think it's a weapon so powerful that it could alter the balance of the entire galaxy. This city was built to protect it, or perhaps to imprison it." The captain took a step back, her mind racing. If this weapon had been locked away here, hidden beneath the ocean for so long, what could have driven the ancient civilization to conceal it? And why had it remained dormant, waiting for someone, or something, to trigger it? "Can you tell what the weapon is?" the captain asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Talik shook his head, still examining the symbols. "I'm not sure yet. But the readings, they're unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's as if the weapon has been lying dormant, waiting for the right signal. It's almost like it's alive." A heavy silence settled over the room as the crew processed Talik's words. Alive, a weapon that could think, that could respond to stimuli. The very idea was terrifying. The crew had no idea what they were unleashing, and the more they uncovered, the the more uncertain they became. "Captain, we need to leave." Zora spoke up urgently, her voice strained. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. If this city was built to contain something, then it might not stay dormant for long." The captain looked at her crew, weighing the options. The situation had changed. They had come here to explore, to uncover the mysteries of an ancient civilization. But now it was clear that they had uncovered something far more dangerous, a weapon capable of destroying entire worlds. "Prepare to retreat," the captain ordered, her voice commanding. "We'll leave the data we've gathered for now. But we need to get back to the ship, and we need to do it quickly. This is no longer just an exploration. We're dealing with something much more dangerous." As the crew began to back away from the throne, the air around them seemed to grow colder. The walls, once glowing softly, now flickered in and out of light, as if responding to their movement. The captain felt a sudden chill run down her spine. Something was stirring beneath the surface. The weapon, the city, everything was awakening. And they might have already unleashed something they couldn't control. The awakening of the weapon. The sudden chill in the air sent a wave of unease through the crew as they backed away from the throne. The flickering lights seemed to grow more erratic, as if the city itself were reacting to their movements. The captain's heart pounded in her chest. The decision to retreat was no longer an option, it was a necessity. "Get to the exit, now," the captain ordered, her voice firm but tinged with urgency. "Move quickly. We don't know what we've unleashed." The crew scrambled, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. But as they turned to leave, the ground beneath them trembled. At first, it was barely noticeable, like a faint vibration. But it quickly grew stronger, more violent. The walls seemed to shudder as if something beneath the surface was awakening. "Captain, we've got movement," Talek shouted, his voice tense. His eyes were glued to the console on his wrist, the readings flashing on the screen, growing erratic with each passing second. "Whatever it is, it's active." The captain didn't need to ask what that meant. The weapon, the ancient power they had discovered, was no longer dormant. It was alive. "Zora, lead the way," the captain barked. "Everyone, stay close." As the crew hurried through the winding corridors, the city seemed to come alive around them. The once still walls now pulsed with energy, and the faint hum that had echoed through the throne room grew louder, almost deafening. The air was thick with a strange, crackling energy that made their skin prickle, as if the very atmosphere itself was being charged with power. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed through the corridors. The sound seemed to reverberate off the stone walls, growing louder and closer. The crew froze, hearts racing. The path ahead was blocked. An enormous metal door, once thought to be a part of the city's architecture, had suddenly slammed shut, trapping them inside. "Captain," Zora shouted, her voice frantic. "We're trapped." The captain spun around, her eyes scanning the now sealed passage. The city had been silent for millennia, but now it was alive, and it wasn't going to let them leave so easily. "Can you open it, Talek?" the captain demanded. Talek quickly moved toward the door, his fingers working frantically at his control panel. "I'm trying, Captain, but something's wrong with the power grid. The whole system seems to be waking up. It's resisting my commands." The battle for control. The crew stood frozen in place, their eyes locked on the massive structure that loomed in front of them, pulsing with raw, dangerous energy. The ground trembled violently beneath their feet as the weapon began to hum, its power sources awakening one by one. A deep, resonant growl filled the air, as though the city itself was alive, breathing in unison with the growing power of the weapon. Talek's fingers flew over the control panel, his face lit by the flickering screens. "I can almost." There. He hit a button, but the panel sparked and fizzled, sending a surge of energy through his body. He recoiled, his teeth gritted from the shock. "Are you okay?" Zora asked, rushing to his side, but the concern in her voice was tinged with urgency. Time was running out, and they had no idea how much longer they had before the weapon would reach full activation. "I'm fine," Talek said, his voice tight. "But this thing, it's got a fail-safe. It won't let me access the core controls without a key. We need to find it." The captain's eyes darted across the metallic landscape around them, trying to make sense of the ever-changing structure. It wasn't just the weapon that was shifting. The city itself was transforming, adjusting to the weapon's activation. The walls were closing in, and the corridors were narrowing, as if the city was a living organism designed to protect its most dangerous secret. "We don't have time for that," the captain snapped, her voice hard. "We need to shut it down now." Her words were barely out of her mouth when the ground shook again, harder than before. A loud, terrifying mechanical roar echoed through the chambers. From deep within the structure, they could hear something massive moving, something that sounded like a vast, metal door grinding open. Talek looked up, eyes wide with realization. It's opening. The weapon is activating its defenses. The captain's heart raced. They were running out of time, and if they didn't act fast, they'd all be wiped out in an instant. "Zora, Talek, get ready. We'll have to fight our way to the core and shut this thing down manually if we have to." Before either of them could respond, the structure in front of them began to move. Massive metallic limbs, like the arms of an ancient machine, unfolded from the base, creating a monstrous figure. It was almost like a giant war machine, something designed not just to protect, but to destroy everything in its path. "Captain," Zora yelled, "it's coming to life. This thing is alive." The crew quickly spread out, taking defensive positions. The structure's limbs were now fully extended, and with a deafening screech, a massive cannon-like weapon appeared from its chest. The weapon pulsed with dark energy, the air thick with the power it was gathering. The captain's mind raced, her instincts kicking in. She had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. They were not just up against a simple weapon. This was an ancient, almost mythical force, something that could obliterate planets with a single strike. And it was coming to life, piece by piece, to unleash its destructive power on them. "Zora, we need to move fast. Talek, keep working on that panel. Find a way to disable it." But the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The weapon's massive cannons swiveled, their focus clearly on the crew. Another screech filled the air as a blast of energy surged from the weapon, narrowly missing the crew. The shockwave sent them tumbling, crashing against the walls. The captain fought to keep her bearings as the echoes of the blast reverberated through the hall. "Is everyone okay?" the captain gasped, pulling herself up. "Yeah, but we can't take much more of this," Zora panted, eyes scanning the weapon's massive form. "We need to get to its core now, before it opens fire again." Talek, his hands shaking, managed to regain control of the console for a brief moment. "I'm this close," he said, eyes fixed on the panel. "The key is close, just a little more time." But as he spoke, the ground trembled once more, and the weapon's energy levels spiked. The air grew thick with the oppressive power it was generating. Suddenly, the entire room seemed to be filled with the sound of grinding metal, as if the weapon was waking up from a long slumber, ready to destroy everything in its path. The captain knew they couldn't afford to wait any longer. The weapon was charging its main cannon, and its power was reaching critical levels. "Zora, move out," the captain ordered. "We'll take a different route, cut off its power supply from the other side." Without waiting for a response, the captain dashed forward, her weapon ready. Zora and Talek followed closely behind, their focus locked on the rapidly advancing threat. The weapon was fully awake now, and it would take everything they had to survive its wrath. They sprinted through the hallways, their footsteps echoing in the empty city, as the walls seemed to shift and change with each step. The closer they got to the heart of the city, the more they realized just how powerful the weapon truly was. But they had no choice. If they didn't shut it down, the galaxy would fall to its fury. As they rounded the corner, The captain's heart nearly stopped. In front of them stood another door, larger, more imposing than anything they had encountered yet. This was it. This was the core. The captain motioned for Zora and Talik to take positions, then turned to the massive door. "We've got one shot at this. If we don't get this right, we're all done for." They were so close now. But as the door slowly began to open with a slow, grinding sound, the captain knew they weren't out of danger yet. Whatever lay beyond that door could be worse than anything they'd faced so far. And time was running out. The battle for control. The crew stood frozen in place, their eyes locked on the massive structure that loomed in front of them, pulsing with raw, dangerous energy. The ground trembled violently beneath their feet as the weapon began to hum, its power sources awakening one by one. A deep, resonant growl filled the air, as though the city itself was alive, breathing in unison with the growing power of the weapon. Talik's fingers flew over the control panel, his face lit by the flickering screens. "I can almost." There. He hit a button, but the panel sparked and fizzled, sending a surge of energy through his body. He recoiled, his teeth gritted from the shock. "Are you okay?" Zor asked, rushing to his side. But the concern in her voice was tinged with urgency. Time was running out, and they had no idea how much longer they had before the weapon would reach full activation. "I'm fine," Talik said, his voice tight. "But this thing, it's got a fail-safe. It won't let me access the core controls without a key. We need to find it." The captain's eyes darted across the metallic landscape around them, trying to make sense of the ever-changing structure. It wasn't just the weapon that was shifting. The city itself was transforming, adjusting to the weapon's activation. The walls were closing in, and the corridors were narrowing, as if the city was a living organism designed to protect its most dangerous secret. "We don't have time for that," the captain snapped, her voice hard. "We need to shut it down now." Her words were barely out of her mouth when the ground shook again, harder than before. A loud, terrifying mechanical roar echoed through the chambers. From deep within the structure, they could hear something massive moving, something that sounded like a vast, metal door grinding open. Talik looked up, eyes wide with realization. It's opening. The weapon is activating its defenses. The captain's heart raced. They were running out of time, and if they didn't act fast, they'd all be wiped out in an instant. "Zora, Talik, get ready. We'll have to fight our way to the core and shut this thing down manually if we have to." Before either of them could respond, the structure in front of them began to move. Massive metallic limbs, like the arms of an ancient machine, unfolded from the base, creating a monstrous figure. It was almost like a giant war machine, something designed not just to protect, but to destroy everything in its path. "Captain," Zora yelled, "it's coming to life. This thing is alive." The crew quickly spread out, taking defensive positions. The structure's limbs were now fully extended, and with a deafening screech, a massive cannon-like weapon appeared from its chest. The weapon pulsed with dark energy, the air thick with the power it was gathering. The captain's mind raced, her instincts kicking in. She had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. They were not just up against a simple weapon. This was an ancient, almost mythical force, something that could obliterate planets with a single strike. And it was coming to life, piece by piece, to unleash its destructive power on them. "Zora, we need to move fast. Talik, keep working on that panel. Find a way to disable it." But the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The weapon's massive cannons swiveled, their focus clearly on the crew. Another screech filled the air as a blast of energy surged from the weapon, narrowly missing the crew. The shockwave sent them tumbling, crashing against the walls. The captain fought to keep her bearings as the echoes of the blast reverberated through the hall. "Is everyone okay?" the captain gasped, pulling herself up. "Yeah, but we can't take much more of this," Zora panted, eyes scanning the weapon's massive form. "We need to get to its core now. before it opens fire again. Talek, his hands shaking, managed to regain control of the console for a brief moment. "I'm this close," he said, eyes fixed on the panel. "The key is close, just a little more time." But as he spoke, the ground trembled once more, and the weapon's energy level spiked. The air grew thick with the oppressive power it was generating. Suddenly, the entire room seemed to be filled with the sound of grinding metal, as if the weapon was waking up from a long slumber, ready to destroy everything in its path. The captain knew they couldn't afford to wait any longer. The weapon was charging its main cannon, and its power was reaching critical levels. "Zora, move out," the captain ordered. "We'll take a different route, cut off its power supply from the other side." Without waiting for a response, the captain dashed forward, her weapon ready. Zora and Talek followed closely behind, their focus locked on the rapidly advancing threat. The weapon was fully awake now, and it would take everything they had to survive its wrath. They sprinted through the hallways, their footsteps echoing in the empty city, as the walls seemed to shift and change with each step. The closer they got to the heart of the city, the more they realized just how powerful the weapon truly was. But they had no choice. If they didn't shut it down, the galaxy would fall to its fury. As they rounded the corner, the captain's heart nearly stopped. In front of them stood another door, larger, more imposing than anything they had encountered yet. This was it. This was the core. The captain motioned for Zora and Talek to take positions, then turned to the massive door. "We've got one shot at this. If we don't get this right, we're all done for." They were so close now. But as the door slowly began to open with a slow, grinding sound, the captain knew they weren't out of danger yet. Whatever lay beyond that door could be worse than anything they'd faced so far. And time was running out. The heart of destruction. The massive door groaned as it opened, revealing a dark, cavernous chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly into the depths of the city. The air was thick with energy, buzzing with a low, deep hum that reverberated in their bones. The walls of the chamber were adorned with ancient symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. Talek, Zora, and the captain stepped cautiously into the room, weapons drawn, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. But the only thing they could hear was the pulsating hum of the weapon growing louder, more intense. It was as if the city itself was aware of their presence, watching them, waiting for them to make the wrong move. "Stay alert," the captain whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising sound of the weapon's power. "We're in the heart of it now. One wrong step, and it's over." The walls seemed to pulse in response to her words, as if the city itself was alive and reacting to their intrusion. They moved carefully, taking in the vast chamber that surrounded them. In the center stood an enormous, glowing orb, the source of the weapon's power. It was suspended in midair, surrounded by a latticework of ancient machinery, the likes of which none of them had ever seen. Talek was already at the console, his fingers flying over the controls, trying to decipher the alien technology. This is it. This is the power source," he muttered, his voice tinged with awe. "We have to disable it before it reaches full power. Otherwise, we won't survive the blast." Zora stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the orb, a mixture of dread and determination in her gaze. "How do we shut it down?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Talek didn't look up from the console. "I'm trying, but it's like nothing I've ever encountered. This technology is beyond anything we have. We need to find the source code, the key to disabling the power grid." The captain stood watch, her eyes flicking nervously between Talek and the orb. The air in the chamber was thickening, charged with an energy that was rapidly escalating. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing in on her. The weapon was moments away from becoming fully operational, and they were running out of time. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the chamber, and the lights flickered. The ground beneath their feet rumbled again, shaking violently. The orb's glow intensified, its light flashing in rhythm with the pulsing energy that filled the room. Talek slammed his hand on the console, his frustration mounting. It's not working. The system's too complex. We need that key, the key that activates the shutdown sequence. It's in the core, somewhere in this chamber. Before the captain could respond, the chamber doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The air grew colder, and the hum of the weapon surged to a deafening crescendo. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the room, its tone cold and unfeeling. Warning. Power critical. Self-destruct sequence initiated. System shutdown impossible. The crew froze. The threat was clear. If they didn't act fast, they'd be obliterated in a matter of minutes. Self-destruct. Zora gasped, her voice filled with shock. This city has a self-destruct built into it. Talek's eyes widened in realization. It's not just a weapon. It's a fail-safe. If anyone tries to tamper with the weapon, the city initiates a self-destruct to ensure it's not used against them. The captain cursed under her breath. We don't have time to argue. We need to find the key, or this place will be our tomb. They spread out, searching frantically for any sign of the key. The orb was at the center of the chamber, surrounded by a series of ancient pillars that rose high into the air. Symbols were etched into the walls and floor, glowing faintly with a strange energy. But there was no obvious way to access the core, no clear path to the key. Zora moved to one of the pillars, running her fingers over the ancient symbols. They look like instructions, she muttered, her voice low. It's a puzzle. We have to activate these symbols in the right order to open the core. Talek joined her, his eyes scanning the symbols. We don't have time for a puzzle, he said, panic creeping into his voice. We need to find the key now. But the captain held up her hand, signaling for silence. No, wait. Zora's right. The symbols are part of the shutdown sequence. If we solve the puzzle, we can unlock the core and stop the self-destruct. With no other choice, the crew began working together, carefully deciphering the symbols and activating them in sequence. The chamber seemed to shift with each move, the energy around them growing more intense. The hum of the weapon was deafening now, and the ground beneath their feet was shaking violently. Almost there, Talek shouted, his voice strained. Just one more symbol, and we'll have access to the core. But as he finished his sentence, the entire chamber seemed to shift, the walls moving inward as the weapon's power reached its peak. The orb at the center of the room blazed with an intensity that threatened to consume everything in its path. The captain's heart pounded in her chest as the final symbol was activated. The room fell silent for a brief moment, the humming ceasing as the energy around them began to dissipate. But then the orb flickered, and a massive shockwave surged outward, slamming them backward. They were too late. The final countdown. The shockwave from the orb's explosion reverberated through the chamber, throwing the crew to the ground. Dust and debris filled the air as the walls groaned under the pressure. The captain's heart raced, and she struggled to push herself up, pain shooting through her body from the impact. She could hear the groaning of the ancient city around them, as though it too was reaching its breaking point. Is everyone okay? The captain called out, her voice hoarse. Zora groaned as she sat up, her hand clutching her side. I'm fine. But that was way too close. She staggered to her feet and scanned the room. The energy around the orb had shifted, and the hum was now a deep, ominous rumble. Talek, still sprawled on the floor, managed to sit up with a grunt. His face was pale, but his eyes were still sharp with determination. I think we stopped it. For now. The power's destabilizing. We've got to get out of here before it goes off. The captain's gaze locked onto the orb in the center of the room. It was flickering erratically now, its glow shifting from blue to red as its energy reserves were drained. A slow but terrifying countdown began, flashing across the walls in large glowing numbers. Wo Arn Ing. Self-destructi in 10 minutes. The captain's mind raced. They had no time to waste. The self-destruct sequence had already been triggered, and if they didn't find a way out, the entire city would implode, taking them, and possibly the entire planet, down with it. "Move," the captain barked. "We're not done yet. The core may be disabled, but this place is still a death trap. We need to get out of here now." Zora and Talik scrambled to their feet, their eyes wide with urgency. They turned and bolted toward the exit, but the walls of the chamber began to shift again. It was as though the city itself was fighting back, closing off every escape route. They had to find another way. "Over there," Talik shouted, pointing toward a narrow corridor that had just opened. It wasn't much, but it was their only chance. They sprinted toward it, dodging falling debris and making their way through the twisting passageways. The walls continued to rumble, and the air was thick with the smell of burning machinery. Behind them, the orb continued to flicker, its countdown now flashing more urgently. "War and ing. Self-destruct in 5 minutes." The captain's pulse quickened. "We're not going to make it at this rate," she shouted. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning like a maze designed to trap them. They were disoriented, unsure of where the exit was or if it even existed. Then the ground beneath them suddenly cracked open. A sharp metallic screech rang through the air as the ceiling above began to collapse. The crew jumped back, narrowly avoiding the debris that fell, narrowly missing them. Panic set in, and they pushed forward with everything they had. The countdown continued, each second slipping away. There was no time to think. There was only survival. "Warning. Self-destruct in 3 minutes." Zora's voice was breathless as she turned to the captain. "What now? We can't outrun this. The whole city's coming down." The captain's mind raced. They had come so far, but it felt like the city was collapsing faster than they could escape. But then something caught her eye. A glimmer of light up ahead. A tunnel, just large enough for them to fit through. It was their last hope. "Keep going," the captain shouted, her voice hoarse with desperation. They charged toward the tunnel, their legs aching, their lungs burning. The tunnel ahead was dark, but there was a faint light at the end, a sign of escape. They were so close. "Warning. Self-destruct in 1 minute." The air seemed to thicken, and the walls shook violently, sending tremors through the ground. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. There was no turning back now. They had made it this far. As they neared the end of the tunnel, the captain felt the floor beneath her feet tremble once more. She glanced back, half expecting the city to collapse around them. But there was no time to look back now. They had to push forward. "Get out," the captain screamed, urging them onward. With one last burst of energy, they'd reached the tunnel's exit. The air outside was fresh, and the sky overhead was clear, untouched by the destruction inside the city. They had made it out, just as the countdown reached its final seconds. "Warning. Self-destruct in 10, 9, 8." The ground shook violently as they collapsed to the ground, panting for air. They had made it. They had escaped the destruction, but they were far from safe. The city was still collapsing, its energy destabilizing as the countdown hit its final seconds. "Self-destruct in 9." An explosion ripped through the city. The force of it was so powerful that the shockwave sent the crew tumbling across the ground. The sky above them erupted in a brilliant burst of light as the city, ancient, powerful, and full of secrets, finally succumbed to its own self-destruction. The crew lay on the ground, bruised but alive, watching as the city disintegrated into nothingness. The sound of the explosion reverberated in their ears, a reminder of how close they had come to their own destruction. But they had survived, and in the silence that followed, as the dust settled around them, they realized that this was only the beginning. They had uncovered something ancient, something that could change the fate of the galaxy forever. As the captain stood up, looking at the ruins of the lost city, she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same again.